A shocking moment unfolds on the streets as a corrupt cop steals a black woman's gold chain in broad daylight. The officer, fueled by his racist beliefs, thinks he can get away with this brazen act of injustice. He pulls her over, accusing her of something she didn't do, then, in a quick and ruthless move, snatches the precious chain from her neck, his face twisted with arrogance, believing he holds all the power. But what he doesn't know is that fate has other plans. Just seconds after the robbery, a figure emerges from the crowd, none other than the cop's own son, an FBI agent. His sharp eyes spot the injustice immediately, and a tense standoff begins to unfold. With the authority and determination of a federal agent, he knows he can't let this act slide. But will his father recognize him in time? And can a son stand against his own father's wrongdoings, even when blood ties are at stake? The air is thick with suspense. The clock is ticking, and the situation is about to explode. Will the son's conscience win, or will the cop's twisted views blind him to what's right? Stay tuned as the drama unravels, revealing a shocking turn of events. You won't want to miss what happens next. The tension in the air thickens as the woman, still in shock from the theft, stands frozen. Her eyes widen in disbelief, not just from losing the chain, but from the realization that the officer standing before her is wearing a badge of authority he's supposed to uphold. The gold chain wasn't just jewelry to her. It was a symbol of her hard work and perseverance, something her family had passed down through generations. Losing it felt like losing a piece of her identity, and the weight of the injustice made her voice tremble as she demanded her chain back. The cop's expression remains cold, dismissive. He tells her to stay quiet, but it's clear she's not going down without a fight. Her voice grows stronger, calling for help, but in the back of her mind, she knows no one will come. Who would believe her over a uniformed officer? Who would dare challenge him? Then, just as the cop takes a step toward her, his son appears in the distance. The FBI agent had been following an undercover investigation nearby, and when he heard the commotion, his instincts kicked in. He wasn't expecting to find his father at the center of it. The realization hits him like a punch to the gut. His father had crossed a line, and now, with every step, the agent knows the choice before him is as clear as it is painful. The struggle of loyalty to family and justice hangs in the balance. What will he do? The FBI agent's steps falter as he gets closer, his heart racing. His father, a man he had once looked up to, was the very embodiment of corruption now. How could this be happening? The agent had always believed in justice, in the rule of law, but standing here, seeing his own flesh and blood committing such an unforgettable act, shattered everything. His mind swirled with conflict. Was this really the man he had grown up with, or had he been blind to the darkness lurking beneath the badge all these years? The woman, sensing something had shifted, tried to inch closer to him, her eyes filled with both hope and fear. "Please," he whispered, her voice breaking, "I just want my chain back." But the agent stood frozen, torn between his duty and the father who had raised him. He hadn't seen his dad like this in years. This wasn't just a bad decision, it was a breaking point. Meanwhile, the corrupt cop smirked, seeing the hesitation in his son's eyes. He knew he had him. Family ties were strong, and he could twist them to his advantage. "What's wrong, son?" he sneered. "Are you going to let her tell you what to do? Or are you going to stand with your old man, just like you always have?" The agent's hands clenched into fists. The words stung, but they weren't just words. They were a reflection of the manipulation he'd been subjected to his whole life. Growing up, his father had always painted the world in black and white, right and wrong. Except now, the lines were blurred, and the truth felt more dangerous than ever. The weight of his badge felt heavier than before. Would his decision today define the rest of his life? Could he live with himself if he didn't do the right thing? From the corner of his eye, the woman saw the subtle shift in the agent's posture. She didn't know him, but there was something about the way he carried himself, something human, something real. She had to believe he would do the right thing, even if it cost him everything. The silence between them stretched, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Would the agent make his move? Or would his father's grip on him be too strong to break? The atmosphere felt suffocating, thick with uncertainty and fear. The FBI agent's pulse pounded in his ears, drowning out everything except the choice that hung over him like a storm cloud. It was the woman's brother. The agent's jaw clenched as he recognized the man, a fellow agent who had been part of the same team for years. The shock of seeing him here, in this moment, threw him off balance. This was no coincidence. "Dad," the woman's brother said, his voice cold and steely, "you're under arrest." The agent's world spun. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust anymore. It was a family affair, a web of lies that extended far beyond the uniform. His father's double life had been exposed, and the shock of seeing his own brother-in-law lead the charge hit harder than anything he'd experienced before. Was this the end of his family, or was it a chance for him to finally break free from the chains his father had forged around him? In the chaos, the woman's eyes met his again. She could sense the shift, the change in his demeanor. She didn't know the full story, but she could see the agent's inner turmoil. She had no idea how deep this ran, how far-reaching the consequences of this moment could be. But the air was thick with an undeniable truth. Things were about to spiral out of control. The agent didn't know what to do anymore. His mind swirled with confusion and guilt. He had always thought his biggest battle was with his father. But now, with the sound of his brother-in-law's voice echoing in his head, the stakes had never been higher. The tension shattered in an instant as the woman's brother, a seasoned agent, stepped forward and placed his hand on the cop's shoulder. The moment his father turned to face him, the mask of authority slipped entirely. There was no bravado now, no defiance, only fear. "You don't have to do this," the cop pleaded, his voice a desperate whisper now. But the woman's brother wasn't swayed. "You've crossed too many lines, Dad," he said, his voice unwavering. "It's over." The agent watched as his father was cuffed, his entire body trembling. But even in that moment, the agent felt no triumph. Instead, a heavy weight pressed on his chest. The man who had shaped his life, who had defined his understanding of right and wrong, was being taken away, not by him, but by his own blood. The betrayal felt like a punch to the gut. Then, as the last of the agents processed his father into the car, the woman's brother turned to the agent, his expression unreadable. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. "But you need to make a choice now. Which side are you on?" Before the agent could answer, a car screeched to a halt, and another figure stepped out, a woman no older than 25, her face tense with urgency. She was dressed in black, a badge hanging from her neck, but it was her eyes that froze the agent in place. It was his sister. "I'm here to take you in," she said calmly, but the words hit like a storm. "You've been under investigation for a while now. We have evidence of your involvement." The agent's world crumbled as everything he thought he knew about loyalty, family, and justice collapsed around him. His father's corruption had been the catalyst, but now it was his own actions, or inactions, that would define his fate. It wasn't just his father who had betrayed the law, it was him too. Stunned, he stumbled back, trying to process what was happening. His own sister, working against him. The ties that bound him to this world, to his family, had frayed beyond repair. As the agents moved toward him, the sound of his sister's voice was distant, as though coming from another world. "You've been living in a lie, and now you have to face it," she continued, her gaze never leaving his. As he stood there, paralyzed by the sudden twist in the story, the woman, who had quietly watched everything unfold, stepped forward one last time. Her expression softened, a flicker of empathy in her eyes. "You don't have to lose everything," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You can make a new choice." The agent looked between his family and the woman, the weight of his decisions crashing down on him. The walls were closing in, and the road ahead seemed uncertain, but one thing was clear. His past had caught up to him in ways he couldn't have imagined. The future was now in his hands, But the path to redemption or ruin was more tangled than ever before. The agent stood there, torn between the past and the uncertain future ahead. The sirens slowly faded, but the weight of the moment lingered. His sister's gaze was unwavering, a reflection of everything he had failed to see until now. His entire life had been built on trust, loyalty, and blind devotion to a system that had failed him, and now he faced the consequences. In the distance, the woman watched, waiting for him to make the choice that would define him. She had already made hers, standing up for justice even when it wasn't easy. Her quiet strength resonated with him, a reminder that sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest. "I can't keep running," the agent finally said, his voice thick with emotion. He turned to face his sister, the realization hitting him like a flood. "I've been part of this corruption for too long." His sister nodded, no judgment in her eyes, only a quiet understanding. She wasn't there to tear him down, she was there to help him rebuild. As the agents took him into custody, the woman stepped forward, offering a small, reassuring smile. In the end, the chain, the symbol of stolen dignity, was returned, but the true recovery had only just begun. The agent had chosen redemption over betrayal, and the road ahead would be long, but the first step toward a better future had been made. The story was far from over, but in that moment, change had begun.